morning, y'all, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. I'm Tim. I'm standing here with Cindy Bowles, and we're down here at Farmer Branch, Texas. This is right here outside of Dallas, and this garden is beautiful. And Cindy's been growing Japanese maples for quite a while. So what we're going to do today, she's about to be hosting a meetup here from the Texas Japanese Maple group on Facebook. A meetup about Japanese maples. We're going to give you tips for gardening with Japanese maples in the heat of Texas. And, you know, it definitely can be challenging. How long have you been gardening down here in Texas?
I've been gardening here for 22 years, and the tips I have are very easy. The first one is plant them in October, late September or October, if you can. I have actually planted some in the ground in the spring, but our hot summers are hard on them, and so it's best to plant them in October. And what I usually do, I buy lots of them in 1 gallon pots, and then keep them in that pot a year or so, or a 1 gallon pot, and then ease them up to a 2 gallon over on my patio. I always have a lot of them on my patio, and then find out where I'm going to put them in the ground. They move easy. They're easy to move. They have a shallow root zone. I have moved many of them 3 or 4 times. But the care is, watering them the first year is important, you know, to pay attention to the water. But mine don't require any special watering. I don't fertilize them. I just put them in the ground and watch them grow.
Yeah, your garden here is beautiful. You're gardening in a slightly shaded backyard back here. You've got some trees tucked into your house in the front yard. And you've really found a way to enjoy the beauty of Japanese maples down here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
I didn't say that. That's shade is incredibly important. And I have 4 pecan, we're standing under 4 pecan trees. They have not fully leafed out, so you can't tell how dark the shade is in the summertime. But there's just a couple of spots of direct sun in the summertime. But the shade, Japanese maples here are understory trees, necessarily understory trees. And so if you have a shady garden, there's nothing better than Japanese maples for landscaping.
So we got 20 years of gardening here in Texas, expert advice here. If you're growing something in a similar zone or a similar heat index, take these words to heart. She's been doing it, and she's got a beautiful garden here in
Farmers Branch.
Here in Farmers Branch, Texas.
It's a Dallas suburb.
Mm-hmm. So everywhere I turn, we got Auggie. I mean, you came to the meet and greet the other day, picked up some plants.
I did, yeah.
And been to our open house, shot top 5s before. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're asking people tips for growing Japanese maples in Texas. Where in Texas are you?
I am located in DFW, North Texas, yeah.
Okay. So how long have you been growing Japanese maples?
I think it's about 3 years now. I actually purchased my first Japanese maple from MrMaple.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you greatly on that. What are some of the biggest challenges for people growing Japanese maples here in Texas?
Well, myself personally, I make it the absolute hardest for myself because I tend to do a lot of, I tend to grow most of my trees in pots. And so if I were to start all over, I would tell people, put them in the ground, you know. I love the bonsai look, and I love having large trees in small pots, but it gets really challenging in the Texas heat when you're hitting 100 degrees for 60 days straight, and you're having to go out and water, and maybe water twice a day, and then you're worrying all day that your trees are drying out. And so if I were to start all over, I would say get some big shade trees, and, you know, plan ahead. Look for shade, plant your trees in the ground. Of course, your Japanese maples are going to look great in pots. You can do both in ground and in pots as well. But down here in Texas, it's not the easiest way to grow Japanese maples.
It's harder to have an entire collection in containers.
Yeah.
How many do you have in your collection?
Oh gosh, I've lost count. But I would say maybe around 400.
Around 400. So you can see how it becomes more of a challenge to have in the containers.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly having to water.
Exactly. All the time, every day.
And then you've got a lot of trees to water.
Yeah, you got big trees, you got small trees, and each tree, depending on where you got it from too, they're going to have a different soil matrix, and they'll hold water at different rates and evaporate water at different rates and use water at different rates. So you're always having to monitor all the trees, and you can build sections for yourself on, this section here will need this amount of water. I can water every couple of days. This section here you need to water every day. But that stuff, it's a huge undertaking. Something that I do not recommend that you do to yourself.
So if someone, has just getting into Japanese maples,
Yes.
they're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is there anything that you would, they've been told you can't grow Japanese maples here. Any recommendations you would have on someone who's just in the very beginning stages?
Sure. You absolutely can grow Japanese maples down here. Find yourself a nice shady spot.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you've got well-drained soil. Morning sun, afternoon shade, that's critical. And start off with something small if you can. If you're completely inexperienced with Japanese maples, and get something that is hardy down here in Texas, like a bloodgood. Bloodgood is going to do well down here, and I myself didn't give myself. I was, I'll start off with something challenging, and then I had a few trees die on me. So start off with something that is going to do well down here, like a bloodgood, and then find its sweet spot in the yard. And see how well it does, and then you can progress and find yourself something else.
I really too liked your words saying take these trees, plant them in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, you take a Japanese maple, you plant it in the ground, it gets established, and it finds moisture itself a lot of times.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can water it and help it out, but it doesn't require the same level of care as a tree does in a container. Because in a container, you are taking care of that.
Exactly.
It's like you've got a pet.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You've got a pet that you've got to feed constantly.
Yeah.
You've got a tree in a container. You've got to have good drainage if it's in a container first off. But good drainage in Texas means that it also has to be watered frequently.
Exactly. The trees in your ground, for the trees that are in the ground, you almost don't even have to worry about them. Yeah, occasionally you do have to water them, of course, when we have the dry spells down here in Texas. But in the ground, they mostly take care of themselves.
Hey, Auggie, I appreciate you jumping in today. I appreciate you giving people some advice with some of your experience that you've done and dealt with down here in Texas. And I'm really hoping that these, conglomerations of advice that people who grow Japanese maples down here can really help other people, experience Japanese maples in this high heat setting.
Absolutely. It's absolutely possible to do down here. I love them. I love their beauty. I've got way too many that I can handle right now. I hope to correct that situation somehow, but I just can't get enough of them. I can't help it.
Hey guys, I'm here with Doug McDougall, and if you're filming a video in Texas and you don't get Doug in it, did you really film a video in Texas?
No.
So I got to get Doug on here. Doug, I know, but for the viewers, where are you gardening from in Texas?
Lake Tawakoni, the south end, about an hour and a half due east from where we are right now.
Now, I'm asking people today what their tips are for growing Japanese maples in Texas. Now, what would you say are some of the main challenges and some ways to kind of get around that? What are you doing to garden with maples in Texas is really the question.
Well, everybody knows the biggest problem is the heat. And from, say, the 4th of July till all the way through September. So my number one thing I think that people overlook, and you can grow Japanese maples in any kind of soil. They're very adaptive. Mm-hmm. But the number one thing I think I did was amend my soil. Not so much to make the plant, grow better, but to save the plant in the heat. We think about the sun and the shade and the heat and how we're trying to protect it above ground, but below ground is just as crucial. And if you can have dirt that maintains water but sheds water at the same time so that it's not, wet feed on your tree, you're already ahead of the game. You need both. What's above that we all view and see, but a lot of us miss what's going on below the ground, or we don't even think about it. The struggles the roots are going through, what they're having to fight through to bring up water.
Such a good point. I've had several people here mention too that you'd talked them into amending their soils here and they've been having more success. What kind of amendments are you adding to some of the soils? I imagine there's a lot of clay as well like we have, but what kind of amendments are you encouraging people to use?
Well, for years I've built my own compost, and huge amounts of compost. Semi-loads is what I was working with. But I've eaten up all my area and can no longer rely on my own compost because I got too many trees and I don't have the extra land for the compost. But one of the things that I found was really beneficial was pine bark. I still buy compost from Living Earth or there's a place here in North Texas that most people aren't aware of, and it's called Silver Creek. And it's near MrMaple. It's in South Fort Worth. It is the most amazing dirt yard that you will ever find. They have green sand and lava rock mixed in. They will bring you minerals and just some of the, and it's the cheapest place I can find too. But I would say that, adding compost, adding pine bark, again, all you have to worry about is 18 inches. We're not talking about chilling down 3 or 4 feet or trying to remove dirt and completely replace it, just to mend it, just so that clay doesn't dry up. Even if you water every day, this clay will dry up within a matter of hours. And then your tree's waiting all night or whatever until you water it again. And they just, they get into a struggling mode, and then they're not ready to protect themselves.
Oh, I think those are great points. Doug, you were at open house last week. We should have just rode back to Texas with you, man.
Yeah.
We saw you.
Before y'all did.
I know, you beat us down here. we took one extra day with the storm, but we kind of got a full share of that. Hey, thanks for jumping on here today and telling us some of your tips for Texas, man. We always appreciate seeing you, brother.
I appreciate you guys.
Y'all, I'm standing here with Eric Bing. Eric, what got you into gardening?
Well, so I've always been excited about plants. But most recently, I lived in a place that didn't even have a garden. And a friend of mine died at the beginning of the pandemic. And I wanted to sort of plant a tree in her honor. And that really is what started all of this. I started with one Japanese maple, and I probably have 70 now.
Nice.
And that was just a few years ago.
Wow. You told me something a little bit off air. When was the first time you planted a Japanese maple?
The very first time I planted a Japanese maple, I was 9 years old. I had saved up all my money from mowing lawns, and we got to buy whatever we wanted at the end of the summer. My brother bought a BB gun, and I bought a Japanese maple, and have loved it ever since.
Where are you gardening now?
I garden in Dallas.
Okay. So down here in the high heat setting of Texas.
It is. There's heat and there's Texas heat, and I got Texas heat.
So what we've been doing is we've been going around asking people who have had experiences of gardening with Japanese maples down here in Texas. What tips would you give to somebody who's just getting into gardening with Japanese maples down here in this high heat?
Well, so I think there's a couple of things. One is our high heat, and then the other is our dirt, our soil. So here in North Texas, we have a lot of clay, and it's thick clay, and the water doesn't drain. And so you have to be really, really careful not to overwater, because it won't go anyplace, and it will just cause root rot, and things will just die. And particularly in our heat, you think it's like it needs water because it's so hot, and you water and you water, and the thing dies. So it's the soil, which is really killing it.
So a good way to fix that would be go into your beds. If you've got clay, raise up some of those beds.
Yeah.
You can bring in soil and actually raise some of those places up. Then you're going to have good drainage, and you can bring in some organic matter and some other soil that will actually be more beneficial to the tree as well. Get that good drainage. And the clay is not necessarily a bad thing, but the drainage is.
Yeah.
Poor drainage on clay is what makes clay, bad for Japanese maples.
Absolutely.
If you dig a hole and you pour water in there and you come back an hour later and there's still water there, it's probably poor drainage, and that can cause root rot on Japanese maples. So that's an excellent recommendation on making sure that you've got something that these Japanese maples can thrive and do well.
Yeah.
That clay also often around here is also very alkaline.
Very alkaline. So one other tip I'd give them: get your soil tested. I thought, well, why would I get my soil tested? I learned so much, and it changed the way I garden. It's so alkaline. I've now brought in some acidic soil. I've created berms. I brought in sandy loam, things that I would have never thought about had I not gotten tested.
And that's true with Japanese maples, azaleas,
Conifers.
many hydrangeas and conifers. They like that more acidic soil. The majority of the plants that we garden with today are from a more acidic soil-based plant ecosystem. And if you can get that soil a little more acidic, that helps out a lot.
Yeah.
And then also, not just your soil, get your water tested too, because often our wells that we have here in this Dallas-Fort Worth area can be more on that alkaline side
Absolutely.
as well. Any other tips you got?
Stop at Mr. Maple.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, Eric. Thanks so much for
Great.
jumping in today. And I appreciate you helping give some tips for gardeners in this area.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay, Max,
Yeah.
are you recording? Okay, Max, tell Matt what's your favorite tree?
My favorite is Japanese maples.
Oh,
It's
man,
Japanese
high five.
maples. Woo!
Yeah, I love it.
I love it.
Guys, we're here with Mina Milad and Max, and we're asking people for their favorite tips for growing Japanese maples in Texas. Mina's organized this whole get together here. He's on the board of the maple site now. Definitely check out the North American Maple site. And Mina and Max, what kind of tips would you give people for well, first off, where are you gardening from in Texas?
I'm gardening in Greenville, which is really close to Dallas. So I'm just outside of Dallas. So we get those hot summers, but not as high humidity as we do in Houston. And all my Japanese maples are potted. So basically all of my tips go towards the potted Japanese maples, but I found the most important thing is having the right soil for those potted Japanese maples. What I use is basically the tree and shrub soil. I mix a lot with pine bark, kind of pine bark nuggets. It would be ideal if they were composted, but I can't find composted pine bark nuggets anywhere. And I add a lot of perlite to just really increase the drainage. That's worked great for me. Those potted Japanese maples right around the beginning of May or towards the end of April.
Cookie.
Okay, I'll get you a cookie. Right around the beginning of April, or I mean the beginning of May is when I usually start putting the shade sail up, because that's when the sun really starts scorching them. So I found that that's best. Yeah, so if you have a black pot, just kind of keep it out of the sun so the pot does not get too hot. Those black plastic pots get too hot.
That's incredible tips. I appreciate you hopping on here. Max, thanks for hopping on here, buddy. High five.
Woo!
Thank you, man.
All right.
I love, my favorite tree is also a Japanese maple, and I also love dinosaurs.
Yes, we have a lot in common.
All right, y'all, we're here with Josh McLeod. Josh, where are you gardening from in Texas?
I'm about 30 minutes from the Oklahoma border up near Sherman, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that we're so well represented in different areas.
Yeah, we have
for this.
people everywhere. It's
And it
great.
can change a good bit in Texas depending on where you're at in Texas.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So what are some tips you recommend for growing Japanese maples in Texas?
So I think the biggest thing is getting them in the ground if you can. It helps protect the roots. It helps you on the watering and just maintaining that balance. I have most of mine in pots just because I don't have the space, and I have to water those pots every single day in the summertime, peak summertime. Every day, everything's getting watered. But the in-ground trees, I've had to water maybe twice over last year. So definitely get them in the ground.
That's a great tip. I always let people know it too. Like, you certainly can grow in containers, but things are so much easier. Like,
Oh, yeah.
especially if you're in any extreme conditions, it's gonna be way more
Yeah,
forgiving.
and especially if you start getting into those high numbers of Japanese maples, it's a full-time job. But also I would say shade. Obviously, they're already, it's an understory tree. They already need shade in less extreme conditions. So definitely lots and lots of shade. Most of our trees here, they can take a couple hours of morning sun. Maybe a few can take until the midday, but then after that, nothing. Maybe some truncatums, but other than that, nothing's getting full sun here.
Oh, this is good advice. Good advice. Yeah, it's an interesting place to be gardening for sure. And there's so many different little microclimates you get around.
Yeah.
It's fun to get people from all over Texas and kind of pick your brain about what's working for you, what's giving you success. And hopefully you'll get more in the ground so you don't have to be watering so
Yep.
much. Sounds pretty awesome. You should be getting, how many maples are you up to now?
Oh man, probably 130, 140.
Wow, how many in the ground versus not?
Oh my gosh, I have maybe 25 in the ground max.
Yeah.
So I'm hand watering with a bucket and a cup every day in the summer, and it's very time consuming, but I love it.
Oh man, I appreciate you hopping on here today.
Yeah.
You have to go watch our game show
Oh,
at
yeah.
open house to see where Josh falls on the game show.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, guys. All right, y'all, thanks for hopping on here today. Special thanks to Cindy Bowles, whose house we're at here, and Mina Malad for putting this event together. Also, special thank you to every single one of you who hopped on here to give us tips for gardening down here in Texas.
We hope that these tips for gardening down here in Texas give some encouragement to y'all who might be beginning to grow Japanese maples in this high heat setting with these unique soil conditions of this deep south.
Hey, if you're new to Japanese maples, definitely check us out at MrMaple.com. You can check out the Mr. Maple Show here and subscribe. We're adding daily content and tons of tips for gardening with Japanese maples, no matter what part of the country you're in. Definitely subscribe.
Take care
God bless.
and have a great day.